Alien Enemies Act. Alien Enemy Validation Guide. New. ACLU obtained ICE's Alien Enemies Act Validation Guide, confirming all it takes to be sent to... Okay, this is what you need, or what they're looking for, I guess, when they're making arrests. Sorry. The person named above is 14 years or older. Check. The person named above is not a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the United States. Check. The person above is a citizen of Venezuela. Check. Okay, so they have to do these three things, I guess. If any of these three requirements are not satisfied, the person named above shall not be ordered removed under the Alien Enemies Act. In such a case, you should consult your supervisor and the office of the principal legal advisor, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and when applicable, initiate removal proceedings under the Immigration and Nationality Act. Oh, cute. They've got different ways to do it. The person named above is validated as a member of Tren de Aragua as determined by reference to the following evaluation form. Instructions. Complete the following validation evaluation form for each suspected alien targeted for removal under the AEA or following apprehension for each alien potentially subject to an AEA removal. After accounting for the two comments below, aliens scoring 8 points and higher are validated as members of TDA. You should proceed with issuing form AEA 21B titled Notice and Warrant of Apprehension Removal under the Alien Enemies Act. Aliens scoring 6 or 7 points may be validated as members of TDA. You should consult with a supervisor and OPLA, reviewing the totality of the facts for making that determination. If you determine an alien should not be validated at this time as a member of TDA, when available, you should initiate removal proceedings under the INA. Aliens scoring 5 points or less should not be validated at this time as members of TDA. When available, you should initiate removal under INA. Okay, comment 1. Even if 8 points or higher, if all tallied points for an alien are from the symbolism and or association categories with no points going in any other category, consult your supervisor. Okay. Let's see. We have... Subject has been convicted of violating Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 521, or any other federal or state law criminalizing or imposing civil penalties for activity related to TDA. That's an automatic removal. B, court records identifying the subject as a member of TDA, describing specific activity of TDA. Ooh, court records are indictments. Okay, an indictment is done off of probable cause. Criminal complaints. When you say a criminal complaint, that's not like a civil complaint filed. That just means what? They showed up on a police report? Sentencing memorandums. I don't even know what that means. That the judge just refers to you being in TDA, I guess. Okay, that's 5 points. Oof, you're almost out of here if you just hit that one. Self-admission. Subject self-identifies as a member or associate of TDA verbally or in writing to a law enforcement officer, even if that self-identification to a law enforcement officer is unwritten or is unwitting, e.g. through lawful interception of communications. Okay, that's nice that you can be compelled to self-testify without probably having any of your rights read to you or anything like that, but okay, Jesus. Criminal conduct information. Subject participates in criminal activity, e.g. narcotics, trafficking, human smuggling, etc., with other members of TDA, including preparatory meetings and significant incidents directly attributed to TDA. Law enforcement or intelligence reporting, identifying subject as a member of TDA to include Bureau of Prisons validations of reliable foreign partner information, credible testimonies or statements from victims, community members, or informants that affirm the subject's membership in or allegiance to TDA, detailed open source media like newspapers or investigative journalism reports that describe arrest, prosecution, or operation of subject as a member of TDA. Damn, so if Tim Pool tweets that you're in TDA, that's 2 points. Subject conducts and or facilitates business with TDA, e.g. money laundering, mule service provider. I don't know what service provider means here, but okay. Written or electronic communications that discuss business with and or communicating with known members of TDA. Cell phone data contains multiple group, organizational leaders, or members' information. Do you have to know? Do you even have to know that they're TDA? It doesn't say that in here, but... Okay. Subject conducts phone calls about the business of TDA with known members of TDA. I wonder if known members here, that means that people that the FBI knows or the ICE knows are TDA, not that the person knows, right? Maybe? Financial transactions indicating criminal activity for TDA with known members, subject to written rules, constitution, membership certificates, bylaws, etc., indicating, together with other conduct, membership of or allegiance to TDA. Where are your YouTube mods? Sorry, here you go. Got them. Subject to tattoos denoting membership or loyalty to TDA. social media posts by the subject displaying symbols of TDA or depicting activity with other known members of TDA. Jesus. Displaying hand signs used by TDA. Subject displays insignia, logos, notations, drawings, or dress known to indicate allegiance to TDA. Jesus. Well, god damn. Why did Biden allow this to happen? That's the real question. Is this worth watching, or is this going to be fucking retarded? Were the last ones on the last page? I don't know. They looked retarded. Associate. Fuck. Oh, hi. Hello?
Hey, I saw you were looking over the... Oh, sorry. This is arguing with you, that lawyer you talked to about the Venezuelan trial earlier this week.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, what's up?
Okay. I saw you going over the ICE kind of, I don't know, worksheet about figuring out if someone's in TDA. I also saw that you had listened to the oral arguments of the appeal. I've been reviewing the order over the last couple days from the appeal. I didn't know if you had a chance to read it, if you had any questions about it or want to discuss it. If not, I understand.
Was this like a 40-page order?
Yeah, it was about, well, technically it was
didn't-
93, including the dissent.
Yeah, I didn't read the order, but I listened to all the oral arguments, yeah. But what about it?
Okay. I was wondering, so whenever, I think that whenever I listen to you talk about it, or whenever I listen to you listening to it, we seem to run into some recurring government arguments that I think are going to probably come up in MAGA talking spaces that I just wanted to kind of quickly hit.
Okay.
If that's okay, just so it gives you ammo.
Hit away.
So first was, I believe they repeatedly in the appeal talked about how the claim should have been habeas rather than APA claims, and they kind of never got off that point. And even in their appeal to the Supreme Court that was recently filed, they also repeated that.
Yeah.
The order does a good job of saying, hey, actually, this is totally fine that they're doing an APA claim here. There's nothing really stopping them from bringing this. And on top of that, the government used a term, their claims sound in habeas, saying like, if you just listen to the claims, don't look at what they title them, they sound like habeas claims.
Sure.
That's not a legal argument that can stand on its own. That's just like what's called like a self-serving statement.
Okay.
And in court, if you make a self-serving statement like that, in specific instances, they can be used, but in one like this, it can't.
Sure.
Just give you an overview of it. So the appellate court just said, hey, we're not even going to entertain this, listen to it closely, and it sounds like habeas argument. And they said, there's really no reason why an APA claim can't be brought here, especially since the government is... What's interesting is they're saying that if the government says that they could bring a habeas claim, then they have the right to bring other claims too, right?
Yeah, the government's trying to make this argument that because it could be a habeas claim, because it kind of sort of sounds like a habeas claim, then it has to be a habeas claim. And then but the real reason why for this was incredibly fucking evil, and it's because it was basically impossible for them, the defense, to really bring habeas claims, because the people who were being deported had no idea when they were being deported because it was happening without notice, and they didn't even know where these people were being held. And I think the reason why the government was trying to make the argument that this has to be a habeas claim is because those necessarily need to be filed in the appropriate district and can't be filed in just an arbitrary federal court. You have to do the right venue there, and there's no way to know what venue you should even be in. So it seems like just a malicious way to weaponize it, right?
Right, and it's that's a good way to put it, and it's also you're right that it is kind of an intentional move. I think there's 2 points on that. Is one, there's no legal argument to this, but there is the courts at times, whenever extreme circumstances happen, will kind of say, okay, let me use my human eyes to look at what's going on, and they might go, well, very clearly, there's no way for them to have filed in the place they were detained because you didn't give them notice. These things. Yeah. These things. And while there's nothing in the statutes that say if you fuck with people's notice enough. They don't have to file a habeas claim. If you make it so that they are unable to because you mess around like this, we are not going to force people to make only bring claims under the statute that would then otherwise remove their ability to be heard.
Yeah.
And then second, a small thing that just shows how fucking clown show the government lawyers are. The argument they're making is they're trying to argue that a subject matter jurisdiction issue is at hand because it's not a habeas claim.
Oh my God. Because they were out of the country?
Well,
because that was one they used. It was like because the planes were already out of the country. Like the implication there being that if they were to round up U.S. citizens and fly them over the Pacific, they could torture them, and a federal court would have no jurisdiction to hear the case. Sorry, that was one of the jurisdictional concerns. Yeah, go ahead.
So they brought that in, and then in I believe it's the concurrence, not the actual order, but in the concurrence they very artfully point out that actually this is just for personal jurisdiction, saying like whether or not a court has power over that person, not whether or not they can hear the matter at hand.
Okay.
So they might even make that argument if they're torturing people in an airplane over the Gulf of America. And
oh my bad, Gulf of America. Oh, I said Pacific Ocean, but true.
Oh, sorry, you said Pacific Ocean.
Yeah,
sorry.
but no, the Gulf of America. Thank you. It'll be the American One Ocean and American Two Ocean for the Pacific and the Atlantic soon. Who knows? But go ahead.
Yes, over American Ocean One. In that case, they might make the same argument, but really what it's saying is that whether or not this court has the ability to, provide remedies for this person, not based off of this statute. So it's just kind of a very small procedural thing that nobody cares about other than lawyers, but it just shows how kind of stupid these DOJ lawyers are.
A little bit. I would heavily disagree, though, there with calling it stupid.
Okay.
I think it's very intentional, and I think that the defense in the oral arguments made a really good point about that. And you could see because the government kept weaseling around because the defense would say, we can't file habeas writs because we don't know where these people are, and they're not being given notice. And then every single time, I don't know who the district court justices or judges are, but every time she would ask the government, hey, can you explain how they are supposed to file these lawsuits? How are they supposed to file these writs? The guy would say, oh, well, these people, these five aren't they? They said that over and over and over again. It's like, we're not talking about these five. We're talking about other people. And he would just say, well, what about these five? They have. And these guys filed it before they were even subject to any of these deportations. But I think that because of how people are being shuffled around and because of the fact that the Alien Enemies Act was signed and then these things happened in the evening. I think was it on a Friday evening? It was just obviously they're trying to just get around any of these people's due process in any way, size, shape, or form, which is absurd. I think it's all intentional the way they're arguing it. That's what it feels like, at least.
Yeah, I agree that it is intentional. I don't mean to imply that they don't know what they're doing when I'm saying they're stupid.
Oh, sure,
this is maybe more from a professional perspective of
the arguments are ridiculous.
Looking at it as an attorney, it's this person's an idiot for making this argument intentionally and doing this because this is so obviously going to fail, and they might still try it just to see what they can get, and maybe just so they can get in front of the Supreme Court, who might listen to this stupid argument. But it's still looking at it, I would never if I saw a colleague make this argument, I'd be I don't ever want to work with that person because that person has very poor judgment.
Sure.
That they are thinking that this is a smart
unless your goal is to just cause as much delay and bullshit as possible because you know that once these people are gone, we're never getting them back. It doesn't matter what the outcome of the lawsuit is. Are you going to compel the government to go to war with El Salvador to retrieve these deported people? They're just gone forever.
Right, exactly. And so then another kind of, I think, talking point that we're probably going to hear is that, this is a political question. This is something that really the courts need to step off and just let the political actors do the political decision making. Because this judge is an activist, and look, he is just enforcing his radical love of immigrants on this administration, which it is really hard to apply to an Alien Enemies Act case. In the past, the Alien Enemies Act they had no issue bringing it before court. They had no issue bringing, questions of whether or not the removals were legal or whether notice had been provided or due process had properly been performed. There is one sole, I believe there's only one real time that it comes up, which is in Ludecky, which is the most prominently cited case in which the court said that they were not going to, that the political question is when the president decides to make his proclamation, in the sense that they are not going to say, if we are at a state of war, we can't say that the president needs to invoke the act at the beginning, middle, or end of the war.
Yeah.
We can't right? But we can say
I hate the Ludecky one was so ridiculous
yeah.
too, because that case had to do with like, which was very fair. Like, when is a war over? And the idea that the microsecond the Nazi party disbanded, the war was over. So I think like, yeah, for them to keep bringing up Ludecky as saying that like, well, look, like, you know, you guys can't say when we're at war, when this applies or when it doesn't. It's like, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a retard, but I feel like it had no relevance there. It just feels like they're just looking for any bullshit argument to try to do whatever insane, unhinged shit they want to do. Yeah.
That is really
and then that and then also just as a real quick thing, because we've totally skipped this over, right? Are you aware that we're now at war with Venezuela? That's what this act means. And I like how we all just like passed over that. Like, because maybe some of Tren de Aragua might be part of the government of Venezuela, and because there might be Tren de Aragua gang members in the United States, we're being invaded actively by Venezuela right now. Like, how, like, that's just, we've totally passed over that we're currently at war with them. Like, what the fuck?
Right. And it is very funny to like for them to make this connection of like, well, Tren de Agua, if you look at it, they're actually part of the government, such that if any action they take is an action of the government, and it's like, even if you make all those connections, we are not at war with Venezuela by an official act of Congress.
Well, so then the argument, the way that Alien Enemies Act applies, which read in good faith, I would agree with the Alien Enemy Acts, that like, let's say that tomorrow Mexico like invaded the United States, the president probably shouldn't have to wait for Congress to do a formal declaration of war before he can exercise war powers, which is why in that Alien Enemies Act, they're allowed to say, or they specify, or while we're being invaded. It doesn't have to be after a formal declaration. It could be during an invasion. That's like the roundabout that they're going. They're like, oh, look, they've already invaded us with a gang, so we don't need the declaration of war from Congress. The invasion is happening right now, and it's so fucking ridiculous.
You're right, and you'll notice that the government cites the very reputable and legally binding Merriam-Webster whenever they discuss invasion, and they hop down to like the third entry and give the most threadbare, hard to see definition of invasion, rather than looking at the writings and discussions of the people that wrote the Alien Enemies Act and the time in which the Alien Enemies Act was passed.
Yeah, I feel so stupid.
That and seeing there's a clear understanding of what an invasion is when they wrote the act, and yet the government ignores it entirely and just says, actually, it only means this one specific entry in Merriam-Webster, and because of that, we now have an immensely broad ability to say what is and isn't an invasion. And one last thing real quick, there is even a third wiggle out, oh, actually this makes this right, is where there's kind of this third other military action within the United States that's not quite an invasion, where an invasion might be an act of conquest. We have to remember that the Alien Enemies Act was written at the end of the 1700s, and the concept of like raiding and like going into other countries to simply, either punitively kill people or to carry off booty for the for the benefit of your nation were still concepts of war that were commonly happening, and like, so they didn't write in like raids or chevauchés are also allowing us to do this. They just said, hey, if anybody else tries to come in here and in a military style try to hurt the U.S. but not necessarily conquer or take land away from us, that still allows us to do it. And again, that is also well discussed and pretty well defined within the discussions of the people that wrote the act. And at that time period, it was pretty well understood what that meant. So you can't really like just kind of like go, oh, actually, selling fent inside of Texas is the same as military action. Right?
Yeah.
So that was just on that one, on that political question. And then the next one, which is like the U.S. really, people might try to say, oh, the government is being harmed by not being able to port them because, look, we're negotiating with Venezuela, or we're negotiating with other nations like El Salvador, and if we don't send these people to El Salvador, it'll hurt our negotiations with El Salvador, or actually, better put, it might hurt the negotiations. And the court pretty clearly says, maybes and mights are pretty weak, even in a like national security or international trade negotiation context, whenever there is an absolute clear deprivation of due process rights.
Well,
and
I don't know if it'll come to this. I don't think it will, because we're like in the APA, habeas, whatever fucking world. But like, I wonder if we could get to a world to where, because these are like a wartime associated act and wartime associated powers, if Donald Trump could just order this stuff, in which case, if we were to say that a court blocking this might intrude on Donald Trump's ability to perform his duties as the president, that actually would be enough to at the very least make it so that the behavior wasn't reviewable by a court because of the immunity decision. That if he could go that route and say, well, actually, I have to be able to do my job with no question, because if you question this, it's a core function of the executive to conduct things around the times of war or whatever. Although I don't think they brought that up in any of their arguments. But yeah, this is so fucking insanely stupid.
But considering how kind of off the cuff the Supreme Court seems to be acting with different orders at times, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't some kind of fiat they just kind of do. I'm a little more skeptic that the Supreme Court would so easily throw away powers of the judiciary for Trump. I could see a way that they would support his action, but yet still retain powers. Like there's been calls for like, oh, we need to limit the scope of court's ability to do TROs on parties outside of the ones that are just before them, right? Or there's been discussion of like shutting down district courts because they are doing decisions they don't like, that Congress doesn't like, and MAGA doesn't like. And I would be surprised to see the judiciary, even one that would, let's say, super loyal to MAGA, I'd be surprised to see them actually reduce their own power rather than just using their power to support Trump, the administration. And in that, so what I'm saying,
I feel like Roberts is getting a little bit irritated. People have always said, I mean, like the fact that he joined Amy and then the three liberals in telling Trump to fuck off for the TRO appeal on that one thing, and then the fact that he issued that public statement saying, you guys can't talk about impeaching judges because you don't like the way that we fucking rule. That's an improper use of the impeachment there. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Not to get too revealing about my opinions of Roberts, but now that Amy is kind of siding with the liberal justices from time to time, Roberts sees that he can kind of get back to being in the middle where he can be this kind of, arbiter of each side rather than, having to just be on the winning team the whole time. And I think he's eager to get back into that. I can decide on each side, and that way, in my mind, I'm the better justice. Fuck Roberts. Anyways, I think that, so whenever you're looking at like that balance of national security versus personal rights, and people that would say, we had to do this, and the court getting the right way could kind of harm the U.S. The government made absolutely no efforts to prove it, right? They just kind of said it, and they provided like a few affidavits. But there are multiple routes in which they could have shown even super highly classified information. I've been a part of cases where there are joint protective orders in which you view things in camera, where only the judge sees this thing. It's not on any kind of record. The judge views it and then uses that to make a decision. I've been in court chambers whenever they've like officially sealed records for various agencies and things like that. And there's no reason why this couldn't be done. And even invoking national security then places a duty on the government to provide specific evidence that they never did. And so I think
the biggest thing is that they're not even trying with a lot of these things.
No.
Like in one, they sent wasn't it like a random Customs and Border Enforcement officer who was saying like, well, I heard that the cabinet was thinking about maybe doing a secrets thing here, so I don't know. And it's like, what the fuck are you guys? Well, like they're showing up to court with nothing. I think for one of the TRO challenges, it's like the guy showed up like an hour late, and they're not laying out anything. There's literally nothing in the record. Like I don't know how you go to fight a TRO and you have nothing in the record to even support the arguments you're making. And it's like, what do you, I don't know. Also, are we living in a world now where you can just infinitely appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court like TROs? Is that just like a thing now that we're going to be doing forever? Or
that's a pretty big discussion in the order about jurisdiction for TRO appeal. You're not supposed to. You're right. TROs, it doesn't even make sense that you could appeal one. It's an ex parte communication, and it's
ex parte and emergency. It's such a big deal. I feel like the whole point of appealing a TRO over a month, there's like at that point, why the fuck just wait for the preliminary injunction? Like why even issue a TRO at that point? Like you've defeated the whole purpose of it.
And also, once you know about a TRO, like the idea that you would go to an appellate court and not just go and have the preliminary injunction hearing, because that's what you're supposed to do. Like the TRO happens, and then once the other party figures out, they take whatever time they need to show up to court, and then you immediately have your preliminary injunction hearing.
Sure.
And it converts the TRO. But if it never converts, then you haven't. And they talk about this in the appeal, that you never took the steps you needed. You didn't ask for the stay. You didn't go in for preliminary injunction hearing, and you had the time.
Oh yeah, when she asks, and they're like had like 5 days, and they didn't even ask the lower court, and it's like why? And then they cringe.
Yeah, she's like her listing the days of the week that they could have brought.
Yeah,
was,
why didn't you do it on Sunday,
cinema.
Monday, Tuesday? Yeah, it was so stupid.
And we've already seen that this judge is totally willing to show up on a Saturday
Yep.
and hear stuff about this TRO. So it is kind of a ridiculous argument. But there's two arguments. One of them is bad, and one of them is almost procedural in nature. Why this appeal was taken? One of them is that because the government is claiming how irretrievable the harm would be, which is not irreparable. Irretrievable is an appellate standard rather than a trial court standard. So irreparable damage means that no remedy can correct the damage that would occur. Irretrievable damage means that the damage is such that you couldn't bring it to appeal. An appeal then could not fix it, right? Because appellate courts can't provide remedies to like actual claims. They only provide remedies to issues that had happened in the trial court. And so
Gotcha. So like if a trial court, if I file a complaint or I'm suing something and I'm trying to get something, if I'm going to an appeals court, I can't change what I'm asking for. I can just change for the ruling to be overturned or upheld.
Right. Whatever the action that you have a problem with, right, or something there. You're having issue with the trial or the court itself, or maybe another party's actions in an extreme case.
Okay.
But so just by invoking that, it kind of gets the appellate court's attention. The appellate court then kind of goes, we don't think it is irretrievable, but we technically have to take it at face value and say, okay, they made the bare minimum evidentiary showing that it could be irretrievable, so we need to take this TRO as an appeal. But also the trial court Judge Boasberg, apologies, I said his name Bozeman last time we talked a lot. I apologize. It is Boasberg. He part of the TRO was named Donald Trump as being prevented from taking actions. TROs can't be used against a president. A president cannot be enjoined in that way. Only the agency of the government, so only people acting on behalf of the government or the president can be enjoined.
Okay.
The president cannot. And so the appellate court actually, by almost operation of law, had to take this appeal. And even in the order, they say they basically deny everything except for they say this needs to be remanded to the trial court to take Trump's name out of the TRO because they cannot do that. But then of course that doesn't then jive with how the 3-hour oral arguments, however long it was, and then a 93-page order. I think that we're kind of getting a little bit into mind reading here, but a lot of judges in these oral argument stages, they whenever you're in front of them, they use the time to their advantage. They flush out all the arguments. You'll hear judges ask questions for things that judge would never grant, but because that judge wants to hear you make the argument and put it on the record of why you're making the argument. And I remember hearing you express frustration whenever you were listening, like, why is this judge? She keeps asking these questions, or there was some repetition of argument that you got frustrated with, and I think it was really that these judges want to get on the record not only how bad the arguments are, but how bad they are, and that the government will defend them.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. I just get frustrated here from a debater perspective. But it's intentional, I'm sure, because by the end of those oral arguments, she even comes back and she I think makes them spell it out basically explicitly, like the insane shit that they're up to. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just wanted to cover that to show that these judges aren't regarded. And finally, the last thing that I think might. And I'm aware that this might become kind of a bigger talking point in conservative circles, is that these TROs are universal, that these TROs are just so broad and so huge that obviously it's an abuse of judicial power, and that's just not true. And it was kind of the basis of the talking point of we need to limit these courts' jurisdiction, we need to shut down some of these courts. They discuss it in the order, but the TRO is actually pretty narrow. It only applies to members of a class. And if you go and read it, what's funny is it actually doesn't even prevent detention or deportation under other means. So we don't know if this is true or not, but according to an affidavit from the government, the plane that did depart, at least one of the planes that did depart and did not get turned around after the issuance of the order to return all the planes, they claim everybody on that plane was being deported not only under the AEA, but under Title 8 of a different act that would allow for them to be deported. And if that turns out to be true, then the government didn't violate the order there because the TRO was very, very narrow. But right now, the government's trying to kind of put forth this idea that, no, actually, because there's this class action and it affects people all over the country, since we assume they took people from all number of cities all over the country. He's now exercising power way outside of his jurisdiction. He's trying to pull planes out of the air, and that's not okay. And so, really, that needs anytime that comes up, and you go, no, go read the TRO. It is not universal. It's very specific on what it is, and also, like you pointed out, it is a 14 days. All right, you can wait 2 weeks, and if you can't wait 2 weeks, it's on you to show it. You can't
show up with
turn around and say,
nothing.
right, yeah.
And they had they had time to do it. And also, this is the thing I stress as well. This happened as well when the OMB was issuing stuff about like these, like, you know, the mass firings or trying to lay people off or the federal freezing of funds or whatever. When people are complaining, or when conservatives are saying shit like, oh, well, you know, just because they don't know how to do it, or, you know, just because, they're all corrupt or whatever. Like, part of being a leader is having everybody prepared for these things. If you're signing these, like, exceptional orders in the evening, and then you're having all your agencies follow through, you know you're going to get challenged ahead of time on this. You should have all of your arguments and all of your ducks in a row ahead of time. You have the strongest legal representation, arguably, in the world available to you. Not only do you have the entire Department of Justice, your Solicitor General, everybody to make the strongest arguments ever, now you're also engaging in extortion with all of these private law firms to force them to give you pro bono services to defend your actions. You literally have the entire world at your fingertips for forcing people to defend your shit. Right. How are you showing up to court, 5 days after a TRO has been issued with no argument whatsoever? What are you doing with all your fucking time? Like, it's a joke, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a very sad joke, honestly. But whenever I'm reading through these and kind of like thinking about what's coming in the future, it's very obvious that everyone's gunning for the Supreme Court, or at least the government's gunning for the Supreme Court on this, and just really seeing what they can push. I do not like being hopeful regarding the Supreme Court decisions, but I kind of have to be here. And I think that there is a narrow path that, Roberts is probably going to tightrope to find his way over to Barrett and the liberal justices. But it's even in that case, I think he's going to cede a bunch of power and just that worst slap on the wrist with the government.
Do you really? The only thing that makes me hopeful is that, and again, it's hard to know how smart or stupid these judges are, because I hear conservative judges are evil and dumb shit, and I'll read stuff by like Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. I was like, oh, they seem pretty smart. But then I read stuff by like Alito and Thomas, and I'm like, ooh, these guys are fucking retarded. And so I can't tell. I would hope that seeing how insane and unhinged the administration is being now, like fully unleashed, hopefully Roberts is writing with a little bit more clarity in mind about the impacts of everything that's happening, rather than before. Because I wonder if there might have been some a little bit of hopefulness, naivety that it's Trump, he's not going to do anything that crazy. Whereas now we've seen in 2 months this administration is actually unbelievably fucking unhinged.
Yeah, I think Roberts is definitely the guardrails held last time, so
yeah,
the guy. And I think I'm pretty selfish, and the main reason I hop on here is to promote the Pragmatic Papers, which there was a new post today. Everybody should go read it. I have 2 articles in there, one of which is discussing contempt and this trial. And in it, I did some more research after we talked, and I kind of came to something that I think it's not satisfying, but it does, at least in my mind, explain a little bit of the behavior at the lower courts, and now that we're discussing the Supreme Court, kind of why they're being so light-handed with the government, is that the government showed up intending to go to the Supreme Court, and Boasberg definitely saw that. And the Supreme Court takes cases that it wants to take. It gets way too many applications to hear everything, and it will, even if it sees an injustice happening, even if it sees like a clear violation of the law, if it doesn't think it's the right case, it won't take it.
Sure.
I'm at this time, I'm not super comfortable talking about my personal life or even my career that much, but I will talk about one thing, is that I worked in criminal appeals for heinous crimes, death penalty stuff, rape, murder, child sexual assault, and you would see, and it wasn't the Innocence Project, it was really guilty people.
Okay.
But you would still see stuff where it's like, oh, okay, this needs to go in front of the Supreme Court. But what was funny is even though you might have a guy where he was treated improperly in the system, he had a really, really heinous crime that's really ugly. And the Supreme Court will go, you know what? we're not going to take that one because we want to do it for an innocent person. Because they want, and it's for a lot of reasons that I don't even fully understand because I'm not a judge, but that is very apparent in the record whenever you look backwards at cases they took, that for a lot of these landmark cases, there were similar cases that came before them before, and whether it's distasteful or politically inconvenient, or even the facts aren't as clear or easy. And if Boasberg laid down a contempt on the government, they could appeal that and go to the Supreme Court. And it might actually end up litigating a lot of what's going on here, even though it's just the contempt. And the Supreme Court and Boasberg might not want to cloud the record with contempt there, and might say, I want a clean record. I want to get everything on here. And they want to go to the Supreme Court, get on up there, but you're going to do it not through contempt. You're going to do it through this way. And you're going to have to stand on your merits. You're going to stand. You're not going to say this judge is unhinged and is being mean to me, so you need to give me what I want. You're not going to say that you weren't given every opportunity to talk to me. You need to go up there and stand on your business and tell them that you think this was a good argument. And it lines up a little bit. It's a little too convenient for Boasberg in the sense that, like, he now gets to abdicate his responsibility of contempt and things like that. But it does make a little more sense, especially after reading their appeal to the Supreme Court for review, in which they basically ignore everything in the court order or in the appellate order, other than the dissent, where they're just like, see, this guy that dissented, actually he knew everything and he's super right. And so it kind of makes sense to me. I think that he might have seen the handwriting on the wall and say, you know what? Okay, fine. These guys want to go there. You go on ahead up there. I'm not going to get in your way of going to the Supreme Court. So yeah, that's all just kind of a follow up from the last thing we talked about.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the time to talk to you. I hope it wasn't. This is my first time just dropping in on my own. Is that
Yeah,
rude
good.
of me to do, or are you cool?
Yeah, no problemo.
Right,
figure
everyone.
out but speak at a more even distance to your microphone, though, because sometimes you're loud, sometimes you're quiet, but otherwise you're good.
Thank you. I'll work on that. Everyone, go read the Pragmatic Papers. It's on the subreddit. And Destiny, you need to read it too. Okay.
Will do. Gotcha.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Fucking nerd. Get this guy the fuck out of here. Let me use a restaurant quick. Hold on 1 second. And watch this video about grums. You know what I'm tired of? The way the alternate left media exaggerates every single thing. Trump blows his nose. JD Vance dive bombs. Interview drives me nuts. Maybe. I mean, in the past, that was an issue, but they still do it sometimes. But now there's a lot of genuinely horrific stuff to look at.
One of the leading thought lords of the reactionary right wing.
I've been busy today and just now saw the Trump clip about his third term. Have there been any Republicans coming out and condemning it yet? No. But I haven't heard anybody coming out condemning it. Remember, Republicans will defend everything. They've already laid the groundwork in order to... defend it, though. And the groundwork is just going to be... You're only allowed to serve 2 terms as president. Trump is not an exception to that. But because the deep state destroyed his first term, and because his election was stolen in the second term, he's really only served 1. So therefore, he should probably be allowed to run 1 more time, and that'll be his second actual term. Like...
One of the leading thought lords of the reactionary right wing is more of a freak than you, I, we, anyone could actually imagine. This all comes with receipts. This is all grounded in facts. This is all quite legally safe for me to talk about. This is all public record. I'm getting this out of the way quickly because I know the person I'm going to be talking about is the kind of person to scream that he's being doxxed, cancelled, and threaten lawyers. This all started from a historic data breach, which isn't actually like quite a safe way to get into this, but when I corroborated it with other sources, I found out that this was just sitting out in the open for anyone to find who knew exactly where to look for a name, a registered company. And then you start pulling on a string and pulling on another string and another string, and you find out that this goes deeper than you would think. Don't worry, Mark. I'm not going to show any more than I have to. You and your family will not be identified. This is not doxing in a meaningful sense that you're going to talk about. This is just you and me having a conversation. Everyone else is along for the ride. By the way, don't reuse passwords for shit like this, especially if you're trying to make 2 separate personas with different names that you're going to LARP as for 20 plus years. If you're a 40-year-old man at the time and 60-plus-year-old now, you've done that. I can establish that. But don't. That's advice for anyone else looking to start up a separate online persona in the future.
Wait,
use
60...
a completely separate email with a completely separate password. It might actually prevent this. Don't use the same lawyers either, actually. The same lawyers to register your company. There's so many steps that this guy has failed at to protect himself, and it's just all come unraveled with publicly accessible information. Also, don't use your real name to register these emails. Your real name's out there on this historical Who Is information. When you update this information, it doesn't go away. It's there. It's stored. The internet never forgets is the phrase I summarize up a lot. The internet never forgets. The internet will never let go. The internet remembers everything that you have done, everything that you have purchased, everything that you have registered. Somewhere deep down until that drive stops spinning, the internet will know, and now we have found it. Some of this, like, disgusting onanist defenders are going to immediately reject the video based on how many subscribers and followers I have, and I don't care. I am a podcaster. I have a normal job. Consider getting one of those before you start trying to swing at me. Most of you are on Twitter for 15 hours a day arguing over whether Yasuke is too woke. Statistically, you don't know me. I know this, you know this, we know this. By the time this finishes, you're going to know me, and that's fine. It's nice to meet you. My name's MLYP. Pause the video, grab a drink. We're going to be here for a while. I want you walking away from this video bemused at the idea that there is a 60-year-old man out there who has a maid outfit wearing VTuber as his public-facing persona, who abuses his parents' goodwill to front up LLC companies so that he can avoid California taxation law, while also trying to drive gamer culture further to the right because he thinks things are just a little too woke for him these days, and his little 60-year-old brain can't handle it. There's a reason.
Okay, is there anything interesting in this video, or is it just going to be him having, like, fucking a persona or some shit? Tell me now, please, who's watched this?
I'm showing my face on camera today. There's a reason that I'm not hiding behind an avatar like I normally do. I am better than him. This is just one of the ways. I'm better than him in every way that fucking matters, to be honest. Like,
Jesus.
On a moral level, on a conceptual level, on a how I earn my money level. I am better than this man. and I don't care that you think otherwise. I know this in my belief system, and his, I am better. I am going to keep saying that this is very findable information. I am going to keep saying that this is all legally accessible information. This is not being doxxed, this is not being cancelled. I'm going to address that again and again.
Intro, 13 minutes. What the fuck? Okay, let's...
More about you than anyone should. Draw your blade, pervert. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what I am calling the Guna-nomicon. Now, this isn't a magic book full of spells that you can only cast one-handed. This is a documentation of Mark Edward Kern, the first in a series of some of the worst onanists, some of the worst masturbators in the gaming sphere, who are trying to mold and manipulate gaming culture to return to a time when they were 12 years old and all they had in life to look forward to is extra cheese sticks and a woman in a bikini. It will become pretty obvious that these men just think with their erections.
Okay.
People forget that hating is an inherently valuable form of critical thinking. I have learned tens of thousands of facts via hating. If you are truly hating, you will take all the time you need to learn everything about the subject you are hating on, just to hate better, deeper, efficiently.
Okay, is this guy being ironic, or is this guy actually like kind of a schizo as well? I can't tell. What the...
Effectively, this is a law of nature, this is a law of hating. The only thing that stopped this from coming out earlier is no one has been motivated enough to pay a data aggregator $11, and there are multiple data aggregators that have this information just sitting out there in the open. The story here is that Grums is a man who has aggressively pursued his personal interests at great cost to his family and his career. The biggest crime here is that anime babes with huge bazongas are his main interest. Actually, no, that's not the biggest crime, it's tax fraud. We'll get there. All of these points are archived in the description with source links. In 1968, Grums comes into the world. Mark Edward Kern, he is a former video game executive. 1992, he gets his bachelor's degree in cognitive science from the University of Rochester. He eventually gets his doctorate from Boston University School of Law with a specialization in IP. He goes on to found Qualia Games in Boston, developing a top-down 2D shooter called Crixer. This is with Blizzard's backing, and he loves the name Crixer. Crixer is eventually cancelled by Blizzard, they do pull the funding, and Qualia shuts down. There's not enough money to pay the payroll. Blizzard used this as a way to get some talent, and Mark is unfortunately the only one to take them up on that offer. He eventually moves on to a role at Blizzard. He serves as an associate producer for StarCraft, works on StarCraft 64 and Diablo 2 as a producer. He's in the credits. I'm not going to dispute the fact that he worked on these games. This is part of his career. March 27th, 2001, FoxyFighter.com.
Oh, did you see? Apparently Blizzard is selling the StarCraft intellectual property, the IP. I wonder what's going to come out from that. He's just a coomer. The guy making the video is on some crazy murder mystery vibe for little if any reason. The guy has one other vid on his channel as well that is just a premiere to announce he's lost a finger and is in the hospital. Jesus.
Is purchased by Mark Kern. Ignore the country of France. That is where Gandhi SAS is located. They're a French company. But Mark Kern is the registrant. Now, Mark Kern isn't a unique name, but there's later information that basically proves that this is him.
Okay.
Now, what is FoxyFighter.com? To put it as simply as possible, FoxyFighter.com is sexy catfight hentai. It is a website run by a persona called Debbie Chan, but Debbie Chan is Mark. And that's underselling it. He has, over the course of 20 plus years, collected a variety of live-action catfights, drawn hentai catfights, quite a bit of like run-of-the-mill porn. However, there are multiple stories where his persona, Debbie, violently sexually abuses women.
Wait, who was it? Fuck. Was it Ian Miles Chong, or was it somebody else? Oh my god, I just fucking accidentally went back at the video. Who faked having a girlfriend, an Asian girlfriend, for years. No, it was the guy that kicked himself in the nuts. Or was it Ian Miles Chong? Oh, Peter Coffin did it. Yeah.
The only thing that stopped this from coming out early is his doctorate from Boston. Mark Kern is the registrant. Now, Mark Kern, to put it as simply as possible, foxyfighter.com is sexy catfight hentai. It is a website run by a persona called Debbie Chan, but Debbie Chan is Mark. And that's underselling it. He has, over the course of 20 plus years, collected a variety of live-action catfights, drawn hentai catfights, quite a bit of like run-of-the-mill porn. However, there are multiple stories where his persona, Debbie, violently sexually abuses women. It's been scrubbed at this point. As soon as Grum's got a sniff that people were investigating this, he ripped down as much as he could. Unfortunately, we archived most of it. The email addresses that we found share passwords when searching a pwn database, which is a database of dumped passwords and email addresses. We found a Foxy Fighter email sharing the same password as Mark Kern's email. Fascinating, huh? We also found this one.
Just as a heads up, I guess, I don't know if it matters or not. If you care about like ethical investigations, you should really only show as much as you needed to show to demonstrate that a thing is authentic. Or sometimes you don't really even have to show much at all because you know the other person won't contest because it is authentic and you can make it available if people really want it. But I feel like revealing your investigation methods and everything like this is probably not okay. It's probably really bad because you're basically just giving people like instructions on how to do like big doxings of people, but okay.
I'm just leaving that out there. Moving on. July 21st, 2001 is the earliest capture of foxyfighters.com. On February 28th, 2002, Debbie wins second place in the third Seeking Femfights story
Hell yeah,
competition,
Debbie!
so he is actively making this stuff. And on March 24th, 2003, we get RussianCatfights.com. This is another site owned by Mark. He confirms it on a Twitter post. March 22nd, 2004, we get an archive of Latina catfights. This is also owned by Mark. June 28, 2004, access to Foxy Fighter goes for about $10 a month. Posts are stories and drawn artwork. November 13, 2004, World of Warcraft releases. This is effectively the pinnacle of Mark's career. He's credited as team lead. He says he works on drafting the TOS in ULA and does licensing with China. He leaves Blizzard shortly afterwards. He says he's going to go and be with some family. So I don't blame him. Like, that was a very hard process, even if he was apparently a bit of a shithead. Look, no one's spoken about him in a good light at Blizzard, really. Like, not in a way that I think a team lead should in this role. Very shortly afterwards, him and a few other Blizzard employees found Red 5 Studios. So he obviously had a couple of friends who wanted to work with him, but he's not really mentioned in a lot of these retrospective books. It's real fascinating. June 15th, 2005, RussianCatfights.com is closed due to changes in US law. And on August 18th, 2005, LatinaCatfights.com is closed the same changes. So I don't want to point out that this is anything egregiously sinister. This was a change that was required in the porn industry to have verified records of the performers. Before this law, those records were not kept. Blizzard in 2008 had some problems. People were stealing breast milk from the fridge. This is attributed to Mark. People call him the breast milk bandit. He wasn't working there at the time, and he's not the breast milk bandit. It's funny to think he is. Please keep doing it. Like, it's very funny. But
okay, what do I fast forward to something interesting?
Breast milk photos on foxyfighter.com. So smoke there's fire, huh, Mark? October 17th, 2008, as forum admin on freecatfights.com, Debbie recommends a Japanese breast milking series to another forum member in /comics, which probably not the best place to do it. MEK Entertainment, Mark Edward Kern Entertainment. It is in Aliso Viejo, which is where everything that he does is based. They are an indie game company looking to leverage the blockchain, maybe, 10 years too early for that hype, but I respect the forward-facing vision. MEK.
Okay, I don't care about this.
They end up chanting in front of him, Viva la muerte. Long live death. They have their counterparts today. They are the people who taunt Americans, Westerners, Israelis, and others with lines like, "We love death more than you love life."
The following is a conversation with Douglas Murray, author of The War in the West, The Madness of Crowds, and his new book on democracies and death cults. We talk about Russia and Ukraine and about Israel and Gaza.
Oh boy.
Douglas has very strong views on these topics, and he defends them brilliantly and fearlessly. As I always try to do for all topics,
I feel like if you made like a grid of people, I think I actually hate the people that are pro-Israel and anti-Ukraine. I hate them more than I hate the people that are anti-Ukraine and anti-Israel. Like, I'd rather you be pro-Russian and pro-Pally than pro-Israel and pro-Russia. I can't. Those are the worst. They're the ones that just, they get me. They get me going. They get me riled up.
also talk to people who have different views from Douglas, including on the next episode of this podcast. We live in an era of online discourse where grifters, drama farmers, liars, bots, sycophants, and sociopaths roam the vast, beautiful dark land of the internet.
Oh no.
It's hard to know who to trust.
True.
I believe no one is in possession of the entire truth, but some are more correct than others. Some are insightful, and some are delusional.
True.
The problem is it's hard to tell which is which,
True.
unless you use your mind with intellectual humility and with rigor.
True.
I recommend you listen to many sources who disagree with each other and try to pick up wisdom from each. Also, I recommend you visit the places in question, as Douglas has, as I have, or at least talk face to face with people who have spent most of their lives living there, whether it's Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, or Russia.
Not true.
Let's try together to not be cogs in the machine of outrage, and instead to reach toward reason and compassion. There is no Hitler, Stalin, or Mao on the world stage today. Plus, there are thousands of nuclear weapons ready to fire. Human civilization hangs in
You know, there was no Hitler on the world stage like when Hitler was coming into power either, right? He was just a dude. But I mean, thank you. Okay.
the balance. The 21st century is a new geopolitical puzzle all of us are tasked with solving. Let's not mess it up. This is the Lex Fridman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Douglas Murray. What have you understood about
Wow, I feel like I hear this guy's name a lot. Maybe in that Guru subreddit thing, but I don't know what. Apparently, they all hate him. I feel like every time I've heard his name brought up, it's always on some retarded shit as well. So he might be hateable. I just don't know anything about him. I guess we'll find out.
war in Ukraine from your visits there? Just looking at the big picture of your understanding of the invasion of February 24th, 2022 and the war in the 3 years since.
Well, I mean, several things. There's political angles which are forever changing, but on the human level, as you know, if you visit troops, frontline troops, you have that admiration for people defending their country, defending their homes, defending their families. I'm struck by the way in which that is at a remove from the sort of political noise and the media noise and much more. It's very easy to get caught up in the to's and fro's
Okay, I'm starting to feel like I'm going to hate him, but we'll see.
of today's news, but that, to my mind, is that's the single thing that struck me most in my visits there. Is just the people I met who are fighting for a cause which, at that level, is unavoidable, undeniable.
So the thing that struck you that's different from the media turmoil is just the reality of war.
Yeah, of course. I mean, people who have either lived under the Russian occupation from invading armies and then come back out into the world, having been liberated as in late 2022, or the people now, when I was most recently there in recent weeks, who were just getting on with their job as soldiers whilst the world was talking about them.
When were you there? Early on in this escalated war of 22?
Yes, first time was I was with the Ukrainian armed forces when they retook Kherson, and I was back in recent weeks and was there when the Trump-Zelensky blow-up happened. In fact, I was in a Ukrainian dugout at the front lines when I was watching it.
Okay, seems base. Never mind. Maybe not. We'll see.
How's the morale? How's the way, the content of the conversations you've heard different from the two visits, separated by, I guess, 2 years?
At one level, I mean, nothing has changed much. It's a sort of, it's not a total standoff because intermittently each side gains territory from the others, but it's not. I mean, there've been no very significant military gains by either side in the interim period.
I think my experience of the soldiers, the people of Ukraine early on in the war, there's a intense optimism about the outcomes of the war. There's a sense that they're going to win.
Yeah.
And the definition of what win means was like all the territory is going to be won back.
Yeah, I certainly, on the front lines facing Crimea, became quite familiar with people who thought that the Ukrainians in late 2022 would even be able to get Crimea back. And that struck me even at the time. And I said I thought that was an overreach.
And now I think the people, the soldiers, at least in my experience when I visited the second time, are more exhausted. The morale, the dreams, the certainty of victory has maybe faded from the forefront of their minds.
Well, 3 years of war will tire out anyone.
What did you think of the blow-up between Zelensky and Trump as you're sitting there in the dugout?
Well, it was a very disturbing place to watch it from. Perhaps anywhere would have been. And I mean, obviously, it was a meeting that shouldn't have happened. It was far too early.
Why do you think so? There's not enough actual pathways to peace on the table?
Well, I think the mineral deal, I mean, I love the fact that everyone's now an expert in Eastern Ukrainian mineral deposits, but
I think, as I've learned, and we'll talk about Israel and Palestine, I'm learning that everybody's an expert on geopolitics and history of war on the internet.
and now mineral deposits, obviously.
Yes.
I'm really speaking at the edge of my mineral deposit knowledge here. But
Yeah.
no, what I could see, the deal that the American administration was trying to get the Ukrainian government to sign was sort of too early, too forced. The Ukrainians were ready to sign a deal, but were obviously under intense pressure. And I think certainly Zelensky wasn't expecting to go until pretty much the day before. Was obviously visibly tired and exhausted again, as you are after that amount of pressure for that long time. And no, I mean, the thing that struck me, and I said this in my column in the New York Post from there, that the thing that struck me was I said to some of the soldiers I was with, what do you make of this? And, one of them just said to me, well, we're advised not to follow too closely the ins and outs of the politics of this, and but of course everyone has Instagram or scrolls, and among dog pictures and the hot women or whatever is, what happened in the Oval. And but what struck me was this same guy and saying, I've got a job to do.
Right. And there's a clarity and a wisdom to that. But your job is bigger than that, right? Is to understand the politics as well. And what do you think about the politics of that moment? Because that was a real opportunity to come together and make progress on peace, right? And it, by all accounts, was not a successful step forward.
I don't think by any account it was a successful step forward, unless to some extent it was a play but from DC to say to Putin, look, we've duffed off Zelensky and, now give us something. That's the only remedial idea I have about what might have been behind it. But I think it was just one of those extremely, just awful political moments. Zelensky was obviously deeply irritated by the interpretation of the war that he was hearing from Washington. It was only a week after the Trump comments about Zelensky being a dictator, and people in the administration implying that Ukraine has started the war. And I think that must be, for Zelensky, a pretty Alice in Wonderland situation to be in. And I had significant sympathy for him in finding it bewildering, because it would be bewildering.
I think the sad thing to me also, on the mundane details of that meeting, and just the unfortunate way that meetings happen, I think it's true that he was also exhausted.
Yes.
There was a dickhead of a reporter that was asked a question about outfit in a way that, listen, Zelensky, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. He's an emotional being, for better or for worse. And there's a dumb dickhead of a reporter.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend.
Who is not an emotional being in that room? What is the juxtaposition there? As opposed to Trump, who's not emotional? I'm so curious what whatever.
He is. Yeah.
The things you know. See, you're a real journalist.
No, he's from one of the new... I'm all for opening up the White House press pool and all that sort of thing, but it means that you get some people in who are sort of... from blogland, there's nothing wring with that, but it means that you get somebody who will do something like that. The problem with that interaction, as I saw it, was that that guy asked that, disrespectful question. And I think it was disrespectful. I'll very quickly say why. I mean, I think that when a man comes from the realm of war into the realm of peace, the people in the realm of peace should have some respect, or at least concession, that the other man has come from the realm of war. And that if you're sitting in a political environment where you talk about people being destroyed and decimated and defenestrated, and much more to a man who's
seen it and
for whom
lived
none
it.
of that is metaphorical, I think that's extremely hard to accept. And I think that probably also at that moment there was a sort of sense of, Zelensky is being disrespected by being asked about what he's wearing. When, as everyone knows, Churchill during World War II used to wear his fatigues on foreign visits. And it's sort of just that, it's to remind people that you're coming from the realm of war. And I think that probably in that moment, one of the things that would have been going through his head would be, but I mean, if this was Putin sitting here being assaulted by a journalist, you'd hope your host stepped in and defended you. I mean,
Okay, I don't know who this guy is. Douglas Smart. I hear his name brought up a lot. Apparently, a lot of people don't like him. He seems based so far. These are good points. And I like that he's bringing these up. It really doesn't have anything to do with the fact that, and people forget this, it's not about sometimes the things that people do, it's about what they don't do. It's not even that maybe Trump was at fault for the thing that journalist, or Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend or whatever the fuck said, which Trump might have been, actually, I don't know. It's more like there would be a proactive expectation for you to step in and say something, right? Like that you would defend him, right? This is your guest. He's ostensibly on the same side as us. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not. For you to sit there basically just kind of join in on the memes and just think it's all a fucking joke has got to be bewildering. In no other circumstance in life would that sort of inaction be acceptable to a friend. Imagine you're with a friend and you're with a group of other people, and those people start going in on your friend and making fun of him, and then at the end your friend's like, bro, what the fuck? And you're like, what? I didn't say anything bad about you. It's like, no, but you just stood there and listened to them fucking rag on me. What the fuck, dude?
Let me try this one out. I mean, if a journalist in the Oval Office, if Putin was sitting there, or a putative journalist said to Putin, everyone knows you've had a lot of facial work done, and word is you've used the same dye that Berlusconi used to use. Can you comment on that? You'd say, well, that's a kind of disrespectful question for journalists to ask, and it's a little bit off what needs to be gone over. And it's the same thing with Zelensky with the outfit. I think it was just petty and threw things off in a bad way.
Yeah, and it was poorly researched because I think Zelensky was explained this like 3 years ago at the beginning of the war, why he wears what he wears, and he's been consistent wearing the same.
It's also
It wasn't poorly researched. It was intentional.
It's an example of the frivolity of a lot of the attempts to understand what's going on. I mean, my view is that since actually most people, in fact everybody, cannot be an expert on everything, one of the things that we always do is to seize on minor and really quite unimportant things. I mean, every side does it. Look at the way in which the American right for years talked about the Churchill bust leaving the White House Oval Office in the Obama years. I didn't want to hear another darn thing about the Churchill bust after 8 years because it was in lieu of trying to understand and actually critique Obama's foreign policy. It was just an easy shorthand. I think it's the same. We're always tempted to that.
But the thing is, I think you mentioned Putin. I think Putin would have been able to respond himself to that journalist effectively, and he would have done it in Russian.
Oh yeah, the language thing.
Yeah, so I wanted to sort of lay out several just unfortunate things that happen in these situations. And I think it happens in all peace negotiations, and it's funny how history can turn in moments like this. I do think there's a dickhead reporter, combined with the fact that, with all due respect, but Zelensky's English sometimes is not very good.
Yes,
Zelensky's English is better than Donald Trump's English.
Apart from anything else, if he had agreed to have not done it in English, he would have bought himself the extra seconds in some of his replies that he needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and have the wit. The guy is funny, witty, intelligent. He could do that in the native language of whether it's Ukrainian or Russian to be able to respond and get the interpreter. So all of that is really unfortunate because I think on those little moments, it's a dance. And there's an opportunity there. The Republicans, the right wing in the United States have a general kind of skepticism of Zelensky. But that doesn't mean it has to be that way. It can turn, it can change, it can evolve.
It's very interesting why it has happened. Why do you think it's happened?
Politics in the United States is so dumb that at the very beginning, it could just be reduced to, well, the left went Putin bad, Zelensky good, rah, rah, Ukrainian flags. Therefore, the right must go the opposite.
Yeah,
sometimes it's literally as dumb as that. Let's each pick a side and call the other dumb.
Right. I had a line I used recently, which the necessity of people who live too long online to try to wade their way out of the memes. It is so like that, because yes, I mean, I can understand that people find it very irritating that so many people who would put BLM flags or pride flags or, trans flags in their bio, then put Ukrainian flags in their bio, despite almost certainly not knowing where Ukraine was. And if that happens, the inevitable instinct of a lot of people who aren't really thinking is to say, that's really annoying. These people are really annoying. I'll sock it to them. But that's where you've got to try to rise above that and say, actually, funnily enough, the fate of a country doesn't depend on my tolerance for memes online today.
Yeah, so I think the memes can be broken through in meetings like the one that happened between Zelensky and Trump. There could have been real camaraderie. I've seen the skill of that just recently, having researched deeply and interacted with Narendra Modi. Here's somebody who has the skill of, for his country, for his situation, being able to somehow be friends with Putin and friends with Zelensky and friends with Trump and friends with Biden and friends with Obama.
That's very skillful.
And that, while still being strong for his country and fundamentally a nationalist figure who's like...
I wonder how much, though, that matters. Like, how much is India in direct confrontation with, like, big foreign policy issues that are huge parts of the American conversation and whatnot? I mean, I know we do stuff and India's important and everything. It matters, obviously, what's going on there. But I wonder how much that's comparable to, like, Ukraine and Russia and everything.
Like, very not globalist, not anything but pro-India, India first, nation first. In fact, nation first with a very specific idea what that nation represents.
Sure.
And that, Zelensky could do all of those things, but have the skill of navigating the Trump room. Because every single leader has their own peculiar quirks that need to be navigated.
Yes, the obvious one, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it was all Zelensky's fault, but I mean, the obvious one was at the beginning of the meeting to say yet again, as he has done for 3 years, thank you to America and American people and American politicians from across the aisle for your support for my country in this hour of need. We're deeply grateful. And because he, for once, forgot to say that.
That didn't matter. He did say thank you towards the beginning of that presentation, didn't he? I don't think this would have mattered at all. I don't think this would have mattered at all.
I think it's not that simple. I think there's
It's not that simple.
He said thank you for having me. Oh, sure. Yeah, maybe he should have said thank you, but I don't think it would have mattered. They would have found something else.
He didn't need to say thank you.
That was why Vance. That was what Vance leapt in on.
He's just picking a thing to leap on. There's a whole energy. You have to. acknowledge in your way of being.
Oh. Wait, did Lex just make a good point? Did Lex just say what I said? Yeah, that it didn't really matter. Vance was just picking whatever to go in on.
That you have been very Biden buddy-buddy with the left for the last 4 years. There's ways to fix that. Listen, these people are complicated narcissists, all of them, Biden, Trump. You have to navigate the complexity of that. And you basically have to say a kind word to Trump, which is like showing, there's many ways of doing that, but one of them is saying, feeding the ego by acknowledging that he is one of the world's greatest negotiators, right? I'm glad we're able to come to the table and negotiate together because I believe you are the great negotiator, mediator that can actually bring a successful resolution to, like, as opposed to have an energy of like, it should be obvious to everybody that Ukraine are the good guys and Russia is the bad guys. There's this whole energy of entitlement that he brought. He forgot that there's a new guy. You got to like convince the new guy that this global mission that this nation is on, this war that is in many ways the West versus the East, that there's ideals, there's whole histories here, that this is a war worth winning. You have to convince them, right?
Yeah, no, sure. And he obviously failed on that occasion. But as I say, it must be bewildering to have landed in a place where people were seriously talking about Ukraine starting the war,
right,
and Zelensky, not Putin, being the dictator. I did the front page of the New York Post the day after the president's comments on that, saying that, the big picture of Putin, just saying, right, this is a dictator. And, you know, I think that people can be live enough to be able to recognize that, you know, you can make criticisms of Zelensky or the Ukrainians, but it doesn't mean you have to fall full Putin. And again, unfortunately, a lot of people in our time don't have that capability.
Can we go right into it? What is your strongest criticism of Putin?
He's a dictator who's very bloody, as repressive as you can be of political opposition, internal opposition. He's kleptomaniac of his country's resources, has enriched himself as much as he could, as he has with the cronies around him. He's not just acted to destroy internal opposition in Russia, but has gone to other countries, including my own country of birth, and killed people on our soil, using, as it happens, weapons of mass destruction.
What's his country
of birth? The use
of
polonium in the center of London. Not good. The use of incredibly dangerous nerve agents that could kill tens of thousands of people in a charming cathedral city like Salisbury. Not good. If the sort of apologists of Putin say, well, he's just a sort of tough man who's looking after his house business, it's like, well, I don't think, even if you think he has the right to do that, he should be doing it in third countries, deliberately using weapons that are meant to show that you could take out tens of thousands of British citizens. Yeah, I mean, that's just for starters.
What do you make for, do you think he's actually popularly elected?
No.
Do you think the results of the elections are fraudulent?
Yes. I mean,
do you think it's possible that it's just that the opposition has been eliminated and he's legitimately popularly elected?
It definitely helps the chap if he's killed all of his opponents.
Something about using the term chap in that context is just marvelous.
But, you know, no, I mean, seriously, if people are worried about, this is another of the sort of slightly Alice in Wonderland things recently about Zelensky, is people are saying, well, why hasn't he's a dictator because he hasn't held elections during a total war of self-defense? And it's like, well, you know, if you're really, really passionate about free and fair elections in that neck of the woods, you'd at least notice that Russian elections are not free and fair in any meaningful sense. But this doesn't mean that you have to say that, therefore, they should have Western-style elections and freedom, that Russia is ready to go and become a Western liberal democracy. It doesn't mean any of that at all. It's just at least note that this is what Putin is.
What do you think is the motivation for his invasion of Ukraine in 22?
It's what he's said for years, which is basically the reconstitution of the Soviet Union.
True. Do you think there is empire-building components to that motivation?
I would trust most of my friends in Eastern and Central Europe who certainly do think that. There's a reason why the Baltic countries are the countries that are spending highest in percentage of GDP on defense, and it's because they're very worried. I don't think they're faking it. I don't think they're faking it for me or for anyone else. I think the Lithuanians, the Latvians, the Estonians, and others are genuinely worried for the first time in some decades.
Do you think there's a possibility that the war continues indefinitely? Even if there's a ceasefire and the peace reached, the war will resume, and he will seek expansion even beyond Ukraine?
Yes. And the most obvious thing is that if Trump manages to negotiate a ceasefire, it'll be a temporary pause. And whoever comes in as president after Trump, Putin will use the opportunity to advance again. Yes. Again, one of the things that I have heard from parts of the American right and others is that all he wants is Ukraine. That's all he wants. And that he has no history or of rhetoric or actions that suggest anything else. And again, it's one of the reasons why it's useful traveling to places and seeing things with your own eyes, because I very much remember being in the country of Georgia after Putin tried to invade in 2008. So I just, again, people don't have to be the greatest supporters of the Ukrainian cause just to recognize that it doesn't seem to be the case that Ukraine is the only thing in Putin's vision.
Do you see value and maybe depth and power to the realist perspective of all this? Somebody like John Mearsheimer's formulation of all this, that in these invasions of Georgia, of Ukraine, it's using military power to expand the sphere of influence in the region in a cold calculation of geopolitics.
It's interesting. One of the fascinating things about the last few years is there's been an act of sort of necromancy of certain figures who were totally debunked. In the area of Ukraine, Mearsheimer and...
Okay. Careful. This guy's starting to sound dangerously based, okay?
In the case of Israel, people like Finkelstein, and it's been interesting.
Whoa! Dangerously based. What?
These are people that one hadn't heard of for some years because they were not listened to, usually for good reason. But by the way, first of all, I'm very skeptical of the term realist in foreign policy because
they're only... Oh my God, what if he says the thing? If he says the thing, he's a stealth DGGer. Because when people talk about realism, okay, that's always code word for realist for only one side. Because if somebody were to say the United States should step in and do X, Y, Z, you go, no, we shouldn't do that. The U.S. shouldn't do that. It's like, well, wait, excuse me, why not? Wouldn't that be realist? Wouldn't that just be us exercising our political power with the way that great power countries do? Well, no, not for you. And also it's the same thing with people saying multipolar. Like, we need a multipolar world. Like, would the United States also, like, or I'm sorry, when they would say multipolar world, it's like, okay, then the U.S. should exert as much influence as possible. No. When we say multipolar, we mean Russia's multipolarity and China's multipolarity, not the U.S.'s multipolarity. That's unipolarity when the U.S. does it. Like, okay, buddy.
Most people, to some extent, will say that they are a realist in foreign policy. Very few people are surrealists in foreign policy. Very few people are unrealists.
I would like to meet them.
A surrealist foreign policy analyst.
We did mention Alice in Wonderland. So.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should introduce the term. But I mean, if you want to look gimlet-eyed out across the world, you're a realist. I think the steelman of their argument would be Russia has or believes it has a sphere of influence, and it is regrettable, but there's very little we can do about that. That would be about the best version of that argument that you can make.
Yep.
Well, to expand on that, steelman, isn't this how superpowers operate?
No.
In the dark, realist/surrealist way,
but
meaning the United States.
Well, but then if that's the case, then the United States should be allowed to operate in a realist, bully way against Russia. Then, right? If that's the argument we're making, no.
Uses military power to have a sphere of influence over the whole globe. Really, China appears to be willing to use military power to expand its sphere of influence
and political power. Yeah, more importantly in the case of China,
political power,
non-kinetic warfare to take over areas. Hong Kong being the obvious one.
Behind that, isn't there always a kinetic threat?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, you disappear some booksellers and students who are protesting, of course. But to go back to this, yeah, of course. Okay, countries believe they have or would like to have spheres of influence. I do think at some point that the so-called realists on that have to try to decide how much leeway that allows you to give to a fairly rapacious regime. And it's not. I mean, it's not the easiest calculation always to make. You have to work out whether or not, for instance, it is true that if Putin had managed to go all the way to Kiev in the first weeks of the war in 22, he would have gone straight on to other places. And, maybe he would have done, maybe he would have taken his time, maybe he wouldn't have done. And this is a very fine calculation that changes every week, let alone every year. My friends in Georgia, I thought, were wildly off the mark when they were believing that after 2008 they could get, for instance, either NATO membership or EU membership. And I thought that was completely unlikely, and I still think it's unlikely and almost certainly undesirable for Europe and for NATO, because you've got to be very careful. And obviously this is one of the issues with Ukraine and has been since the 90s is, are you going to set up a tripwire to start World War III? And that's not a small thing to consider.
So what do you think the peace deal might look like? And what does the path to peace look like in Ukraine in the coming weeks and months?
I'd have thought it would be, regrettably, the Ukrainians ceding some territory in the east. And then making sure they rearm during whatever peace period comes afterwards.
And probably all 4 territories of Donetsk, Luhansk, separation, Kherson.
You couldn't lay any of that out because it has to be negotiated on. But I think that, and I think the ease with which non-Ukrainians are currently speaking about the Ukrainians ceding territory is concerning, because these territories include hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens who do not want to live under Putin's rule, and people who have families in the rest of Ukraine and much more. And, I recently interviewed children who had managed to get out of the Russian-occupied areas. And it's brutal for a Ukrainian to be growing up in that territory. So when people say, well, obviously, Donetsk has to be given to Putin, I think that is not as easy a thing if you're in Ukraine as it is if you're sitting in New York, say. And by the way, I think that on the issue of, there is a school of thought that obviously President Trump to some extent was floating in recent weeks, which is that if a deal is done, a business deal in relation to minerals or anything else, you get a kind of buffer zone of American businesses and investment, and therefore American business people in the region, which would effectively warn Putin not to invade. I don't follow that idea, because not least there were Americans in the regions that were invaded in 22 and they left fast. And we know from Hong Kong and other places, just because there are international financial interests in the region does not mean that a dictatorship will not either.
Oh, true. I didn't even consider that for the Hong Kong stuff.
Militarily or covertly take over. I don't see American miners as being an effective buffer zone against Putin.
By the way, what did you learn from talking to the children, the Ukrainian children from those regions?
Well, I mean, it's heartbreaking, because the only schooling is Russian schooling. Obviously teaching the Russian language, Putin's view of history, and effectively indoctrination. And people can quibble with that term, but it's Putin-esque indoctrination schools. And any children or families that do not want that effectively have to hide and not go out. And I spoke to children and parents who'd had school friends, for instance, the Russians set up in 22 and 23 summer camps for the children of some of the areas that had been occupied, and the children went off to the camps and then they didn't come back. But they were just stolen. I mean, it's thought that around 20,000 Ukrainian children have been stolen in this fashion. That's not a small thing. It's not got very much attention, but yes, I mean, children who would hide whenever the Russian troops came to the door. One teenage boy who described to me how when his mother was out, a woman came around to the house, knocked on the door, and gave him his papers and said that he had to attend the next week to sign up for the Russian army. This is not good. And that's obviously what life is like for thousands of people behind the Russian lines in Ukraine. I just have it in mind when people say things like, well, obviously these regions have to be handed over. It's very, very hard if you're Ukrainian to concede to that.
Yeah, and even if they are as part of the negotiation handed over, I think it'll probably be generations or never that could be accepted by the Ukrainian people.
Absolutely, and I would have thought never.
What do we know about this kidnapping of children? The stories of the thousands of children that the Russian forces kidnapped?
Some of them were in orphanages in eastern Ukraine, not all by any means, but some were. And it's a very complicated story, actually, because many children were taken from their families. The Russians said, well, look at these Ukrainians, they don't even look after their children, therefore we will look after them. And I was recently, when I was there, looking into this story, because it's a very interesting question as to why it hasn't had more attention. One thinks of, for instance, the abduction of the Chibok schoolgirls some 12 years ago now in northern Nigeria, and the appalling abduction of 300 girls by Boko Haram completely gained the world's attention. And I was very interested into why the Ukrainian children who'd been taken by the Russians have not gained similar attention. There's a slight similarity with the war in Israel, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but I do think that one reason is that they were effectively hostages, and the Ukrainians knew, this is my estimation of the terrain, is that the Ukrainians knew that if they made a great deal about this, or as it were, more than they did, that the children would effectively be the most effective bargaining chip. And I do think there's considerable truth in that, because if you look at, for instance, the way in which pressure has been put on the Israeli government by the Israeli population about the kidnapped Israelis, you'll see that it's a pretty effective tactic for any totalitarian regime or terrorist group to operate in a way that means that the population of the country you're attacking pressure their government to do something in terms of concession. It's a very effective tool. And I think that story was partly played down, not just outside of Ukraine, but also within Ukraine, partly for that reason.
As a truth seeker, as a journalist, how do you operate in that world where, at least to me, it's obvious that there's just a flood of propaganda on both sides? Now, of course, when you go there and directly experience it and talk to people, but those people are still also swimming in the propaganda. So unless you witness stuff directly, sometimes it's hard to know. Like I speak to people on the Russian side, and they're clearly, first of all, hilariously enough, they almost always say that there's no propaganda in Russia.
Of course.
Which makes me realize, I mean, you can be completely lied to. Maybe I am in the United States as well, and just be unaware. Maybe Earth is run by aliens. Maybe Earth is flat. So I don't know.
Maybe you've taken mushrooms.
I have before this, and I finally see the truth. And it's you that are deluded, Douglas. Okay, but back to our round Earth discussion, round Earth shills that we are. How do you know what is true?
You can tell it when the bare facts become not true. Like you can tell it when somebody is willing to claim that everything caused the invasion of 2022 except for Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine.
Yeah, there's a hilarious thing that happens. And I think you've actually speak about this, that people are generally just much more willing to criticize the democratically elected leader.
Always.
So the interesting thing that happens is these wise sages that do the narratives of like NATO started the war, right? Which there is some interesting geopolitical depth and truth to that, like that NATO expansion created a complicated geopolitical context, whatever.
For sure.
But they forget to say like other parts of that.
Why? I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't have the theory of mind. I can't tell if it's all a grift. I don't understand. Because, like, the arguments that, because this person sounds like he has like I'm not even going to say deeper, but just a more sophisticated understanding of what's going on. Does Lex just mold himself to whoever he's talking to? But the conversation with Zelensky was so bad.
Story.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, of course, to some extent, it's rather, the most irritating type of question asker at any event is the person who says, I was disappointed that in your 30-minute talk you didn't address X. And I tend to say, well, looking forward to coming to your next talk where in 30 minutes you'll cover everything that could possibly be covered. There's always stuff that's going to be left on the sides. There's always going to be stuff that's left unaddressed. There's always going to be other angles. There's always going to be somebody else who has this interesting perspective, and you can't cover it. Nevertheless, if you cover everything other than the central things, then it's suspicious.
Yes.
Many years ago, I was at a debate in London, and there was a debate about the origins of World War II, and Pat Buchanan, talking of necromancy, was one of the speakers, and Andrew Roberts, the historian, was one of the people on the other side. And at one point, they got so completely stuck into issues of iron ore mining in Poland in the mid, something like this. And the moderator, I remember, it was just a melee. And the moderator turns to Andrew Roberts and says, Andrew Roberts, why did World War II begin? And he said, World War II began because Hitler invaded Poland. And it was a magnificent moment because everything had been a mush. They were just so lost in all the intricate and clever and interesting things that you can talk about the origins of a war, that you forget to mention the thing that's most important. And certainly my experience as a journalist and writer is that one of the reasons why you need to go and see things with your own eyes is because people are certain to tell you that what you've seen with your own eyes didn't happen or hasn't happened. And it helps to steel you for that moment.
It's a gradual thing that happens where the obvious thing starts being taken for granted and people stop saying it because it's like the boring thing to say at a party. And then all of a sudden, over time, you just almost start questioning whether like the obvious thing is even true. I don't know how that happens in psychology.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. I've observed it in a lot of different places, which is the important thing is the only thing you do forget. Everything else is what you remember. And some of us are, for some reason, wired in a way where we try not to forget the important thing.
Remember the obvious thing, yeah.
Yes. And as you say, no, I'm not wanting to be the boring guy at the party who reiterates what is true. Because what a douchebag you'd be if you were that guy.
Nobody likes Captain Obvious at a party. Okay, is it possible that Donald Trump is a mediator, a successful negotiator that brings a stable peace to Ukraine?
It's possible. We'll have to see. I think it's just too early and complicated to tell. That he wants to bring a peace seems to me to be obvious. He's stated it a lot of times. Whether he can, we're just going to have to see. It's extremely hard to see some of the parameters of the peace still. And I would suggest that not the most difficult, but one of the most difficult is that there is no peace guarantee on paper that the Ukrainians can possibly believe. It doesn't matter because we in the West, some of the countries in the West have said it before that we'd secure their peace, and we haven't. And so what other than NATO membership, which is not possible in my view, what other than NATO membership would reassure the Ukrainians that they are going to have their borders secured and the peace of Ukraine secured? I can't see.
I think there's not going to be ever a guarantee that you can trust. I think the way you have a guarantee, implicit guarantees, by having military and economic partnerships with as many partners as possible. So you have partnerships with the Middle East, you have partnerships with India, perhaps even with China, with the United States, with many nations in Europe.
All of which still suggests that if there's enough financial interests in Ukraine, they would prevent another Russian invasion.
There would be financial pressure, yeah. There would be, Russia needs to be friends with somebody, either China or the West. I think a world that's flourishing would have Russia trading and being friends with the West and the East.
That would be ideal. It would be ideal if the regime in Moscow wanted it, but that's not. I mean, again, you get into the thing of, people accused of Russophobia, but I mean, I do believe that after the fall of the wall, Russia was ill-treated by the West, not treated with some of the courtesy that it required. I do think that, and at the same time, that doesn't justify the actions of Russia in the last 20 years.
Right, but let's descend from the surrealist to the realist. It's very possible for Russia to be on the verge of military invasion of these nations, and that being wrong, while also not doing it because they're afraid to hurt the partnerships with the West and with China.
It's possible, but the alliance they formed with this sort of rogue alliance with China to a considerable extent, North Korea, not useful, and Iran is something they seem to find bearable. It's not a very good alliance in most people's analysis, but it's an alliance.
It's bearable, but I don't think, maybe you disagree with this, I don't think the Russian people or even Putin wants to be isolated from the West. I think it wants to be friends with the West and with the East and with everybody. He just also wants Ukraine, right?
Friends on their terms, though. Right?
There's how does the Rolling Stones song go?
Which one?
Not the Satisfaction one.
Sympathy with the Devil?
That's the one. You got me on that one. No, like there's interests, whether it's expanding the sphere of influence. That's one thing on the table, but that can be put aside if you want to maintain the partnerships with these nations. And if Ukraine has strong economic partnerships with those nations, then that prevents Russia from invading.
I think the premise is one that I've seen before. There was a famous, what was his name? Norman Angell. He wrote this book, which was a fantastic bestseller in his day, where he believed that Europe would be in a period of endless Kantian peace because the prospect of European powers going to war was so economically unviable. The book was reissued after World War I, and I never got the second edition, but I assume it was significantly rewritten.
That's a very kind of cynical take, that just because the book is wrong.
I'm not saying just the book's wrong. I'm saying that the idea that cooperation on an economic and other levels.
We didn't get very far because we switched to the Hitler book, but in that other book, it wasn't The Guns of August. Fuck, I don't remember the name of this book, but there was another one written where, I think by the year like 1900, I think Europe had considered itself to be beyond war, that there would be no more war in Europe. Yikes.
Is any significant preventative device to madness breaking out is not something I see. Could deter some people.
Right.
It could deter some very, very rational, economically driven actors, but it fails to take into account all of the other things that motivate people to go to war and to invade and to go mad.
Okay, well, I would argue that in the 21st century, one of the reasons we have much fewer wars is because of the much more, so there's a few tools here on the geopolitical stage. One of them is that we're just much more interconnected economically, globally interconnected. And that is always a present pressure on the world to keep peace. There's a lot of money to be made from peace. There's also a lot of money to be made from war. There's a lot of interest and tension. And I'm just presenting one of the tools that a leader should be using. The alternative is what? Military force? That is an interesting one, sometimes a useful one, but unfortunately, it has its downsides also. And after 3 years of war and the hundreds of thousands dead, you have to start wondering, what are the options on the table?
I agree. I'm obviously for economic cooperation, but my only caveat is not to think that is something which is of ultimate interest, or even at the top of the list of interests, of despots, tyrants, extremists who want something else.
Yeah, but can you read the mind of Vladimir Putin?
No.
A lot of the ideas I hear about peace is Putin bad, victory must be achieved, NATO membership required.
Yeah, well,
there's this kind of like, but what's the alternative? You have to come to the table to end the killing. Is one, and to have different ideas of how to have a non-zero chance of peace. So that the options are. It seems to me the only option. Not the only option, but the likeliest option is a lot of strong economic partnerships. There's of course other radical options. There's Russia joining NATO or something like this, or there's flirting with World War III, essentially giving nukes to Ukraine or something like this. There's like crazy stuff, or a totally new military alliance with France and Britain and Germany and European nations and Ukraine, or some weird network of military power that threatens Russia in some way, or maybe some big breakthrough partnership between India, China, and Ukraine, something like this. Just some really out there ideas, and I think that's how the world that's how the world finds a balance and realigns itself in interesting ways. And
look, it could be. I hope your idea is right. I think it's about it's certainly the most peaceful way for this to be resolved. My only caveat, as I say, is, and also never forget to factor in that people want different things in this world, and some people don't dream as you dream.
I think we'll talk about that in your new book, Death Cults. That one is an easier one for me to understand to the story that you're describing. I am more hesitant to assign psychopathy to leaders of major nations.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not by any means urging you to regard Vladimir Putin as a millenarian madman who cannot be...
What was the U.S. economic relationship with Russia prior to the Ukraine invasion? Was there ever a time where we were friendly and/or trade agreements? I mean, we must have been trading. I mean, no, Europe was trading with Russia. I'm sure we were just trading with Russia ordinarily. No? That'd be my guess.
Anyway, understood.
I think he could be negotiated and reasoned with.
From your lips to God's ears.
Can you steel me on the case for and then against Zelensky as the right leader for Ukraine at this moment? Is he the right person to take it to the point of peace?
We'll see. If he can, then of course he is. He deserves enormous respect for galvanizing his people, for being elected in the first place, for galvanizing his nation at a time of incredible peril, for playing the international game of getting support for his country.
Oh, the guy kicked out of the jet after the invasion of Crimea.
And
Gotcha.
sometimes the person who does that, not there are many people like that, can be the person who also brings about a peace deal, and sometimes not.
I think there's a degree to which he may have seen too much suffering of the people of the land he loves to be able to sit down at a table with a world leader who did the destruction, and to be able to
That is very hard.
compromise on anything.
That's possible. Again, it puts the onus on him, though. It sort of slightly presupposes that Putin doesn't have the same human instinct on that. It is extremely hard. I've noticed this in a lot of conflicts. It's extremely hard the way in which outsiders come in and others who haven't seen what you've seen or gone through what you've gone through and say, it's time to get around the negotiating table and just, you think you didn't see what I saw, you didn't go through what I went through. Who are you to tell me? Goes back to that thing of the visitor from the land of war and the visitor from the land of peace. The visitor from the land of peace can easily talk about getting around negotiating tables, but the visitor from the land of war has seen other things, and it's very hard for somebody who hasn't seen it to tell the person who has that they should act differently.
And the sad thing about humanity is both the person from the land of peace and the person from the land of war are right.
Yes, so that's a struggle. That's definitely a struggle. It's like asking somebody to forgive. I've seen that at a lot of ends of conflicts. People say, the important thing is that we forgive and move on. And then the other person says, your child didn't die of shrapnel wounds.
Yeah, this is, I got a lot of heat for an interview I did with Zelensky. By the way, people privately, the people that message me is all love and support. The people that disagree in Ukraine, soldiers. People online are ruthless. They're misrepresenting me. They're lying.
People online are ruthless and misrepresenting and lying?
Yeah.
Good God, Lex. You discovered a new phenomenon.
I'm a real radical intellectual.
Nothing misses your eye.
I see the truth and I'm unafraid to point it out. No, there's a degree, this idea that you need to compromise with the leader of a nation you're at war with, and in so doing, to some degree, are forgiving their actions. Because the actual feeling you have is you want it to be fair, and the definition of fair when you've seen that much suffering is for him and everybody around him, and maybe even all of the people on the other side to just die because you've seen too much suffering. But the other side of that is, yes, there's children that have died, but you coming to the negotiation table.
Other children from dying, yes, of course.
And so you had this kind of way of speaking about it, embodying that perspective, that it's naive to say to come to the negotiation table. And it is for a person from the land of war. But the very smart, intelligent, and not naive person from the land of peace that is often right in some deep sense about the long arc of history, for them it is the right thing to come to the negotiation table to end the more killing.
The one thing I would add to that, though, is, don't forget that it also depends on whether or not there's a clear shot of winning.
Sure.
If there's a clear shot of winning, and that's the most important. The most important thing in wars is not final negotiations or anything like that. It's simply winning and losing. And if you have a clear shot of winning and you can take it and you're near it, then having somebody else come in and saying, why not stop just before victory is very hard. That's one of the many complexities of the conflict we're talking about.
You know what's the other big complexity of that? Because the clear shot of winning is like a man walking through the desert seeing water. It could be, during war, it really is an illusion. So here's what happens. The really complicated aspect of negotiation is, in order to negotiate peace from a place of strength, you have to have victory in sight.
Yes.
And so the temptation from that position is to not negotiate, is to keep pushing forward to achieve victory. And this, I would say, hindsight is 20/20, but this is the failure in 22 and 2 occasions to negotiate a ceasefire and peace. One in the spring, because Ukraine was in a real big, I would say, position of strength, having fended off the Russian forces around Kiev. That's one. And then, as you mentioned, in the fall of 22, with Kherson and Kharkiv, had a lot of military success. They were in a place of strength. And from that place, they've decided to keep going because victory was in sight. But that was also an opportunity to make peace.
It's perfectly possible, yes.
That's the hard thing.
It's very hard. It's all hard. But I'm just, again, victory can be won in wars and is often won in wars. And you're right, they can also grind on because nobody has the capability to make a breakthrough. It's a case, I mean, the wisdom about civil wars tends to be that they sort of burn out after about 10 years or so for similar reasons.
When you're in the war, can you actually know that a victory can be won?
It's a very good question. And you mean troops on the battlefield or military leaders or political leaders?
Military and political leaders. It just feels like I said, man in the desert seeing water. I think there's a sense that victory is so close. There's times in a war when you feel like victory is close.
No, you're right.
And then it just slips away.
Yes, it's an interesting insight. It's like the way in which there's a force in nature, which is that if you amass an army, amassing it will pull you in to using it.
Yeah.
Extremely hard to amass an army somewhere and then say, let's go back. Yes, you're right. No, it's one of many, many interesting aspects to warfare.
I think the sad thing about successful wars, at least in the modern day, is it takes a great military leader, which I would argue that Zelensky really unified Ukraine in this fight in the beginning of the war.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be that, and like you said, after you amass the army and have military success, to be able to step back and make peace. Those two just don't often go hand in hand, because again, as a wartime leader, especially one who's seen the suffering firsthand, walking away is tough. Especially also combined with that, just the realities of war, where there is probably corruption, that there is things. Once the war ends, there has to be investigations, because the war wasn't won. You might not turn out to be, when history looks at it, the good guy, and a leader doesn't want to. A leader always wants to be the good guy. And so there's just all psychological complexities that are, and you look at this whole picture. In the basic sense, if you want Ukraine to flourish, if you want humanity to flourish, you just ask the question, okay, so what is the thing I would like to see?
There's so many historical analogies you can give, but just surely not rewarding Putin's actions in any way would be a good way to deter him and other dictators from trying to grab land in the future.
So yeah, but it's nuanced, because it's very probably good to be the boring person at the party that says dictatorships are bad, democracies are good, many of the ideals of the West are good.
Democracies are better.
Better, yes.
Yeah.
It sounds like Animal Farm, but yes, 2 legs better. But yes, democracy is better, and invading countries is bad. But World War III is bad too. So after you say something is bad, what's the next step? Because military intervention in a lot of these conflicts,
It'll be about deterrence.
Yeah, but what's effective deterrence?
That we're going to have to keep going over for a long time to come.
My question is, how can we achieve peace in April, in May, right? Not like the adults at the table all seem to tell me, well...
Yeah, but also, it's not about just achieving peace. It's about achieving a lasting peace, too, right? We can go back to my justice thing. But, you can't... It doesn't mean anything. You're talking... Lex is focused too much, it feels like he's focused too much on a ceasefire, not an actual peace agreement. Ceasefires are easy. Peace is hard, right? Israel's had 1 billion ceasefires. There's not peace with the Palestinians.
It's a process. It's complicated. It just feels like this is a thing that might go into the next winter.
Real quick, I'm basically done with this place until I can come back with enough armaments to blow up the worm guy, right?
And there's still maybe initial ceasefire, and the ceasefire is broken, and there's more people dying.
Sure.
And it's that mess. It seems like civility and politeness ignores the fact that people are dying every single day.
I mean, of course, we were almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everyone would like the killing to stop immediately. Of course.
No, I think that is the boring thing at the party. Yes, but they don't say it often enough. Not often. There has to be a frustration. There has to be a frustration. I don't understand why Putin, Zelensky, and Trump can't just meet in a room together without signing anything. Leaders meeting and discussing, and the human connection. There's so many layers of diplomats. It's the problem I have with the managerial class. They schedule meetings really well.
Sure.
They don't get shit done. And I would love it if people got shit done. So the soldiers get shit done. They're fighting the reality of the war, and then the leaders have the capacity to get shit done on the scale
I thought
of
you were a
nations and
god.
geopolitics.
You know what? You're right,
this
dude.
Diplomatic meetings.
I am a god.
No, I agree. Look, I share your frustration about it. At the same time, I think I share your frustration because I've seen a lot of it, in my own eyes. I mean, there was a battalion I was with the other week, and they were hit just after I left their base, and you wouldn't believe what a thermobaric bomb can do to the human body.
I would.
And I share your frustration with that. At the same time, one of the things that happens if you are rushing is that you do, and I've seen this elsewhere, you will put pressure on the people you can pressurize, and you will not put enough pressure on the people you can't pressurize. And that is one of the worrying things that could happen with this. Simply, America can put extraordinary
pressure on Russia.
Diplomatic, financial, intelligence, military pressure on Ukraine.
Or on Ukraine as well. But why not?
It can put significant pressure on Putin, but it's much easier to
do
pressure
it on
Zelensky.
Ukraine, yeah.
And that's one of the many things that makes it harder.
That's one of the
is
things that makes it
temptation to rush for
cringe.
peace. Accepting that peace is the most desirable thing, accepting the horrors of war, which we can linger on, but you accepting all that. If somebody says we've got to get peace today, and the 3 of them around a table, the most likely thing is that it'll be the person who you can pressure most easily, who will be the person that you pressure, and as a result have an outcome which, yes, might stop the killing as soon as possible, but might also set up a situation which rewards the aggressor.
Wow, what a smart dude.
And effectively punishes the victim. And that's an extremely ugly and common thing to happen.
Yeah, and that's the other boring thing to say. The boring truth that the easy shortcut here is to punish Ukraine. And you just have to not do it.
Let's keep being the boring people at the party.
Yeah, well, nobody's going to invite us. All right, let's go from one complicated conflict to perhaps an even more complicated one. Israel and Palestine.
Uh-oh.
Can you take me through what happened on October 7th?
Oof, okay. The one weak spot. When we think a European is a smart, cool political commentator, you gotta be real careful when Muslims come up. Because Muslims are to intelligent Europeans what trans stuff is to American political people. Okay, be careful. Oh boy.
As you understand it, and as you outlined at the beginning of the book?
Well, the book on democracies and death cults is a mixture of first-hand reporting and observation, interviews, and a wider reflection, not just on the war that's been going on since the 7th of October, but the war's been going on a lot longer.
I need to basically fly these orange science packs back to Novice if I want to research them, right? I probably do.
And also, I suppose, on what for me is one of the overwhelming questions, which I'm sure we'll get to, which is the reaction in the rest of the world. Obviously, on the 7th itself, it was a brigade-sized attack on Israel from Gaza. Hamas broke through the security fence and attacked all the softest targets they could. They swiftly overwhelmed things like the observation base in Nahal Oz. They ran through the communities in the south, very peaceful, peacenik, effectively communities of the kibbutzim, as they're called, the communities, and murdered and raped and burned and kidnapped. And of course, they, from their point of view, had the great good fortune of also coming across hundreds of young people dancing in the early hours of the morning at a dance party, and rampaged through that with RPGs and Kalashnikovs and grenades and hammers and more, and got within, 20 kilometers into Israel, on places like Ofakim and Sderot, important towns, and carried out their massacres there as well. We now know that the plan was that Hezbollah did the same thing from the north. Hezbollah joined in the war within 24 hours by starting firing rockets again in very large numbers into northern Israel from southern Lebanon. But the plan was that they would do the same thing from the north and carry out similar massacres there and effectively be able to meet in the middle and garrote Israel from the center. The interesting reason why, I think it'll be found out in the future, but why they didn't coordinate better was Hamas didn't trust any line of communication to Hezbollah to let them know exactly when they were going to do it that wouldn't be intercepted. The Iranian Revolutionary Government in Tehran, which obviously funds Hamas and Hezbollah and trains and arms, knew of the plan. It was a very successful attempt to annihilate the state, but they didn't get close to that, but they got worryingly closer than people might have thought they were capable of. I think from the Israeli side, it was obviously one of the most, if not the most catastrophic intelligence and military failure since the foundation of the state. And I think there are several reasons why. One is a perception problem. What a lot of military commanders and others described to me as the conception. The conception that had prevailed in Israel for some years in the security and military establishment was that Hamas
It's kind of wacky when you look at the kibbutzes that were attacked. I don't know if it's still true today. My guess is it's still true today, but I'm pretty sure all these places are still evacuated. I don't know why I laughed when I said that. It's not funny, but like it's pretty fucked up. When you see like where all the places where all the people lived, and then just their homes getting shot up, grenades being tossed in to blow places open. This kibbutz was Kfar Aza. The lady is chatting. We already know the story. I think for this particular one, I think that you saw the they have like an armory where the guns are stored, and I think when they broke into this kibbutz, the Hamas people who were coming in literally camped out on top of the armory, like actual spawn camping, and were like shooting and killing people that were trying to get to the armory to actually get guns. Oh, as the IDF was coming through, they would like spray paint walls to let people know if they thought there was like a Hamas, like a fighter inside, to let people know. Or they might have marked these too for bodies or for other things as well. But that's what all the spray paintings are on the side of these. Trying to see what else. Oh, you can see where they ran down, and damn, bro, these places are fucked. Oh, sorry, is my screen blocking you? Get fucked. How mad are you? Be honest, how mad are you? Oh, this one.
Here, Sivan, my mom did like an installation here. And I'm inside, and it says here in Hebrew, human remains on the sofa.
Oh, she's explaining the markings or whatever.
11th, and it says there's a terrorist.
Are these all the dots? Are these all bullets?
in more terrible
Yeah, what do you think it is? Retard? Oh, wait, what did she say? Was it shrapnel?
This is our church.
Oh, I don't know.
In Israel, 11
Inside they mark it, just...
it's inside everything. And I want to adopt since they in these places that you can see.
Douglas Murray holds the common right-wing view of Islam in Europe because he's openly gay and because of this. If it's the Charlie Hebdo stuff, yeah, I realize this.
Doors back them.
Barricade?
Yeah,
So the metal doors of the secure room, and then they go inside. I have a friend from the area.
one of the issues, I mentioned this before, one of the issues with a lot of the secure rooms that were built into these places is a secure room is just supposed to keep you safe from bombs, but they don't actually lock from the inside. So if you locked yourself in a secure room, like, or if you close yourself in a secure room, like, they could just walk up and basically come in and kill you. You're like, there's not much you can do. I think one of these, the handle broke or something, so a person got lucky, or sometimes people would like try to hold the doors closed, and sometimes the invading force would just move on to the next thing, but...
There was a motorcycle.
And then from the back of the kibbutzim, I don't know for just one, like you can see into the Gaza Strip, like the run from the fence to the actual kibbutzim, I think you can make in minutes, I think, if you're running. Or maybe it's like a minute drive. Maybe it would take you 10 or 15 running. I don't know. But, well, no, because I think this might be the fence here. It might be minutes, I think.
Hamas post on the Palestinian side, right by the border. Terrible look.
Shut up.
Fine. Okay.
Fuck, I don't remember if we shot a second video in here or not. Hold on. That's the fence. No. That fence was the fence into the kibbutzim. Is that why you say that singular one? This one, I think in the background, I think this one is the fence. I think past this is into the Gaza Strip, I think.
That you see is Sajaya, the town of Sajaya. Behind it is the Mediterranean. All this part is the northern part of Gaza.
Oh yeah, she's saying it, yeah.
Somewhere over there in the Erez terminal.
Singular is kibbutz. Kibbutzim is the plural. Like goy and goyim. Oh, I didn't know that. Kibbutzim. Sorry. Hold on. What's the name? Isn't there the name of the city? Isn't it Sderot? Am I making this up? Oh, yeah. Where the fuck is this video? Sderot, I think, was the closest city to the Gaza Strip, and I think they fully evac that one, too. That's kind of a weird... All of it's really weird, because it's all, like, very lived in, and there's, like, playgrounds and shit, and there's, like, shrapnel and bullet holes, and...